The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're going to love it.
Okay, let's go.
All right, listen, among the millions of reasons why I'm excited for this interview, one of them is I've literally never been able to say that I have the world leading expert when it comes to a topic on my podcast. But today, everybody, we've got Bart Sibrel, who is literally the number one expert in this world when it comes to the moon landing hoax. And I'll be honest, Bart, I'm totally with you on this. Welcome to the Deep Shallow Dive, and let's help the audience understand, gosh, what could be one of the greatest hoaxes of all time, if not the greatest.
Well, before we started, you mentioned that there were friends of yours who weren't even open to
Yeah.
discussing it.
Yeah,
And what I was thinking about, Ray, is, why is that? And it's because those people consider it blasphemous to say that the glorious moon missions were fraudulent, because
yeah.
people have made a religion out of it. Now, if someone is that closed-minded, that means they do not have the ability to perceive the truth, and therefore they're deceived, which means we are correct. You understand that?
Absolutely. I was going to
So,
say, one of the reasons why I'm excited to have you on for a million reasons, but I also think you're one of those people that, quite frankly, the idea and the concept that you've had, you were ahead of your time. You were ahead of your time in such a big way. And what I mean by that is because of what's taken place over the past couple years, whether it's COVID, whether it's the Gaza-Ukraine war, or I'm sorry, the Russia-Ukraine war, or whether it's what's going on in Gaza between Palestine and the Israelis, there has been a unbelievable appetite now for the truth. And people want the truth. And they're going back and they're digging up, hey, what really happened in 9/11? What really happened in the JFK assassination? And honestly, I think we need to talk about what happened with the moon landing. Like, what was that all about? And I'll tell you, for me, what's always been my biggest red flag is, why have we never been back? Every piece of technology, from the recording mechanism that we're using for this podcast, to our cell phones, to our, thin screen TVs, to the navigation on our cars, to the internet, to now AI, every piece of technology has leaps and bounds moved forward, except for the concept of going to the moon. Like, why have we never gone back? That's been my biggest thing. So let's start with, when did you start this discussion? You've been at this for a while, right?
well, yeah, I grew up believing in the moon missions and was quite a fan. I was asleep in bed at the time, about 4 years old, but my father was in the Air Force, and he got a VIP commemorative package of Apollo 11 prints, which he gave to me, and they were kind of like my cherished possession. And we moved around every 2 years, and wherever we went, they were on my bedroom wall. There may be, I don't know, 15 of them, so 3 by 5 all together, saw them every day. So from
Wow.
the age of 4 to 14, if I only saw them once a day, right, that's 3,650 times that I saw the pictures, assuming that they were on the moon, and really mesmerized by them. There's something about it. If they were on the moon, it's kind of magical, mesmerizing, whatever.
Yeah.
And that was my attitude toward it. And then when I was 14, I was watching a television program that interviewed Bill Casing, who worked for NASA through Rocketdyne. And he had the second highest security clearance at NASA to von Braun. He would edit von Braun's personal memos between him and the Pentagon. Now, the Pentagon, they were West Point graduates. English wasn't their forte. And of course, that wasn't von Braun's native language. He was an English major who would touch up the grammar, make sure everything was clear. And he read a memo from von Braun warning the Pentagon that the odds of going to the moon on Kennedy's scheduled deadline of December 31st, 1969, with 1960s technology, was
Mhm.
only about a 1 in 10,000 chance. That there was virtually no way of doing it. If they tried, they would kill the people on national TV. So I don't know if you've ever played poker, but you can win with a losing hand. And so
Mhm.
what they decided to do was to bluff. And I was looking at just before this broadcast, there's a scripture in Joshua, and let me just read it here.
Yeah.
This is from Joshua 9:3 through 15. And basically, there was a group of Gibeonites that God told Israel not to make a peace treaty with them because they lived too close by, and they would be a threat to Israel because they were, they lived very close to them. So it says the inhabitants of Gibeon worked craftily, and they took old sacks on their donkeys, old wineskins, old patched sandals on their feet, old garments, and bread with mold. And they went to Israel and said, "We have come from a great far distance." You see, they went into a lot of detail to pretend to be, from far away. The
Yeah.
mold on their bread was
Yeah.
contrived. NASA says, well, we have this, moon rocks as proof. But someone opened one up and it ended up being petrified wood. And we
Yeah.
have old sandals. And of course, there's a 1,000-page document that says Oswald killed Kennedy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
When one of the links at my website, if you go to Sibrel.com, we showed Dan Rather describing the Zapruder film, which they never showed. And
Yep.
when it gets to the point of the third fatal shot, he says his head went violently forward when it's actually going violently backwards,
Backward. Yeah.
indicating the gunshot was from the. So they have 1,000 pages saying Oswald killed Kennedy, but the film shows that the gunshot came from the front, not from behind. And so my book, Moon Man, is interactive with about 17 video links. You can see them for free at Sibrel.com. That's S as in Sam, I, B as in boy, REL, Sibrel.com. And one of them is this proof we uncovered of them faking part of the moon mission right in front of your eyes. So when I see this gentleman on TV, I'm an open-minded 14-year-old. I'm like, oh, I never thought about that before. I went back to these pictures that I had seen
Yeah.
3,650 times, and I thought, you do kind of see the soil go to a certain point, and then it becomes out of focus, left or right, as if it's a fake background. And the most advanced AI, 2 years ago, not available to the public, but it was at an AI convention. They let VIPs play around with it for a few days. It has a deep fake detector program that's never been wrong. They fed it pictures of the surface of the moon from an unmanned Chinese probe that says it's real. Every single Apollo picture it was fed, it said it had a fake backdrop, that the pixels in the soil are real and the backdrop, they don't line up. It's a fake backdrop. So the smartest AI in the world just said that the moon pictures are fake. So
Yeah.
when I hear that idea as a 14-year-old, I'm thinking, oh, isn't that interesting? Well, I would become a filmmaker, and a filmmaker's job is to make fake scenes look real. And as serendipity or providence would have it, I'm actually editing a film one day for the guy who produced the TV show I saw as a 14-year-old. And I'm like, who is that guy in your show who said we didn't go to the moon? He says, I don't know, call this office. I did. I got in touch with him and he said, Bart, you're a filmmaker. You should make a movie about how they faked the moon landing. And I thought about it for about 6 months. I did about 6 months of research, and all of this is in my book, which is kind of the behind the scenes investigation. And I mean, you can prove that the moon landings are fake with one photograph. Just go to Sibrel.com. It's on the homepage. Sunlight always casts parallel shadows. Two people, two trees, two telephone poles in your front yard, parking lot at work. They'll never
The
intersect.
shadows are going to go in the same direction. Okay. Yep.
Correct. And yet we have a picture from the alleged last mission to the moon of shadows intersecting at 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart. So that light is really close, or it's two lights, and
Yep. Yep.
which means they're not on the moon. They're on Earth because it's definitely electrical lighting. So there's so much proof actually that they faked it. There's much more proof that they faked it than they really went. And yet, NASA, like those people, keep providing this fake evidence. Well, you're asking the fox to prove that it didn't steal a chicken. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
well, what do you
Yeah.
think they're going to say?
That's a great
And
analogy.
so I actually originally turned down the project because I started realizing there's a lot of evidence that seems to indicate that they actually may have faked the moon landing. And at that point, I thought it was at least a 1 out of 4 chance that they faked it. But if the police, came to your door and said your next door neighbor, there's a 1 in 4 chance he's a homicidal maniac, that gets your attention.
Sure.
Even if it's only 1 out of 4. And so actually, Ray, I turned down the project originally. I said, I want to have a wife and family someday. If I start digging into this and they really did fake it, that could be dangerous. So I'm
Yeah.
not going to do it. And then 5 years go by, another client asked me to do them a favor if they got one of my scripts to some famous Hollywood producer. And that favor was to read the Bible. So I read the Bible 5 times from cover to cover. I wasn't a Christian, but it did demonstrate that there is a battle between good and evil. And what always precedes good and evil is lying. Half of all crimes are conspiracies. Half are done in the passion of the moment. Someone gets mad and kills somebody, but the other half are planned out
Yeah.
in advance with multiple people and multiple detail. They plan it out. That's why there's a federal statute called conspiring to kill. That's what gangsters do. And the federal government, sad to say, was taken over by a bunch of gangsters because they did kill Kennedy. According to his own relatives, the CIA murdered Kennedy. If that wasn't the case, then why is Dan Rather saying the exact opposite of what's in front of our eyes on the
Yeah.
Zapruder film? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Which they refused to show. And then you had Robert McNamara, who was defense secretary at that time, who said the public is against, entering the Vietnam War. We need something like Pearl Harbor. So
Yeah.
he admitted before he died that him and the CIA got together and came up with this fake attack on a American ship by a North Vietnamese ship in the Gulf of Tonkin. Congress passed a law to start the Vietnam War based on an event that never happened.
That never
So
happened. Then that's the Gulf of Tonkin. You know what? Gosh, I didn't realize you would be such a amazing resource for all of these really false flags. That's what they all are. Gulf of Tonkin, Operation Northwoods. I forget what exactly that was, but that was another one, right?
yeah, so basically my point in bringing that up is that if they're willing to kill a president of the United States, this is the CIA killing their own president. This is
100%.
the Defense Department falsifying information to start a war that killed 58,000 of their own soldiers. If they're willing to do that, I don't think they're going to have a problem faking a video image of the moon. The only difference is it's a positive lie. You see, whoever killed Kennedy, he's still dead. It's still a tragedy. You can change hats on who did it and why, or 9/11. Change hats on who did it and
Yes.
why, but it's still a
Yes.
tragedy.
Yes.
This is positive. This is your team winning the Super Bowl. And
Right.
I come along and saying, they cheated. They bribed the referee, they moved the goalposts, and they put sleeping drugs in the other team's Gatorade. And you're
Yeah.
like, no, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. But you need to hear it
Yeah.
because if you
Yeah.
have cancer, don't you want to know? And here's the thing, Ray. I went from being the biggest fan to realizing with 100% certainty they actually did fake the moon landing. We found footage of them faking it right in front of your eyes. And we found an eyewitness who was there when they filmed the fake moon landing at Cannon Air Force Base in 1968. So the faking of the moon landing is so much more profound historically than if they had actually gone. You see, either they went, they planted a flag, came back, oh, that was a close one, or
Yeah, yeah,
the most powerful nation on earth lied to their citizens, lied to the world, embezzled $250 billion from their own people and murdered their own people to cover it up. If that's true, that is so much more significant. What does that tell you about mankind? If they faked their greatest accomplishment, murdered people to cover it up, embezzled people, and their own citizens, like Stockholm Syndrome, are defending their own robbers and deceivers.
yeah,
That is
absolutely,
what it is. And that's why it's
absolutely.
highly significant. And it's just ironic that the poster child of conspiracy theories, which is faking the moon landing, right? That they really did. Now, I've noticed something. If we are in the last days before a meteor strike or something, it seems to me that God is making more examples out of people. God help me, please forgive my sin.
Yeah,
For example, during this little thing we went through for the last 3 years, you know what I mean? There were several people who made fun of the people who didn't take the medicine for the illness they didn't even have, and they
right,
dropped dead on camera.
right.
And the CEO of YouTube, which took away ad revenue from me and thousands of other people who were paying their mortgages, feeding their children while she was 160 million net worth. She went before Congress and said, we need to censor people for things like the moon landing fraud. We
Yes,
need to
yes,
stop people from saying that. She dropped dead a couple of years later.
yes.
And so something's going on. I hope the truth comes out. And like I said, you can prove the moon landing is fake with one picture, and
No,
you
I
can
love
prove it with logic. Because today, with 5 decades better technology, 5 decades better rockets, 5 decades better computers. With all that technology, the farthest that NASA can send an astronaut into space today is only 1,000th the distance to the moon. So how
yeah,
could they go 1,000 times farther in 1969 when all of NASA had 1 millionth the computing power of a cell phone? Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic in 1927. That's a distance of 3,000 miles. Imagine 50 years later, and the farthest that someone can fly in an airplane is 3 miles,
yeah, yeah.
because
That's
that's
good
what they're
reverse
saying.
math.
They're saying they could fly 1,000 times farther in 1969 than they can today. That would
No,
be like saying,
that doesn't make any sense. I actually I love the way you set that up with basically proving that we can be deceived. The Kennedy assassination, the Gulf of Tonkin, and then obviously getting into the moon landing in 1969. Okay, let me ask you a couple questions because one of the things you talked about is the computing power. Like to me, it's always just been so insane to think that there was enough computing power in 1969 when computers were literally the size of auditoriums, or if not that big, giant rooms needed on what we now can do on a cell phone. There just wasn't the technology back then to propel us that far. And then second question, actually, what are your thoughts on that? The computing power back in 1969, it could not have even remotely been there.
well, that's true. They claim that they synchronized 2 spacecraft in lunar orbit, one starting at 0 miles per hour and perfectly docking with one going about 3,000 miles per hour. If you were off by more than probably a tenth of a second, you know, I
Yeah,
guess the one trying to mate with the 3,000 mile per hour one, they would die. They would be
yeah.
lost in space. It just came out that Elon Musk says in order to go to the moon, you have to make a minimum of 8 fuel trips first. Okay. And his rocket is 3 stories taller than the Apollo rocket. So with a bigger rocket, you have to make 8 fuel trips first to a space station before you can go to the moon. A recent TED Talk says it could be as many as 27 fuel trips.
Fuel trips to even get to a holding point where
Right.
then you can go to the
So
moon.
basically, Elon Musk just admitted that a rocket taller than the Apollo rocket can only go into Earth orbit. You see,
Okay.
he's saying that because he
Yeah,
says to
yeah,
go
yeah.
to the moon, you would have to take 8 rocket trips of fuel, which each are taller than the moon rocket. And then from there, you would have enough fuel to go to the moon. We found a publication by Von Braun. I put it in the book at Sibrel.com. He says it is commonly believed you can go to the moon in one rocket. And he says that is false. He says the numbers are mathematically irrefutable. The
I never
absolute
even thought
minimum.
about the fuel. I never even
Yeah.
thought about the fuel. And then what about the fuel to get back? Like,
Well,
where's the
that's true.
fuel to get back?
Yeah, the lunar module probably didn't have enough capacity to go from the moon
Okay,
back to the
okay.
Earth. So
And then what are those, is it the Van Allen belts? What is the belts that I remember Joe Rogan talked about it. And by the way, you've been on Joe Rogan, you've been on, I think, so many of the big podcasts. What was that? Is that the Van Allen belts, or there's
I
some
think it's
belt?
called the Ray Doustdar belt, isn't it?
Yeah. The Ray
But
Doustdar,
most people don't know this, but it's a field of radiation is high up in the atmosphere. It starts at 1,000 miles up. So every space mission is generally around 250 miles approximately, which is 750 miles below the beginning of this huge field of radiation that is approximately 30,000 miles thick. The only time a human has said to have gone through it would be to the moon and back. Well, one of the clips at Sibrel.com, which is part of the book, I write a chapter, then I say, go to this clip 1, write a chapter, clip 2, is we have a NASA engineer saying that that radiation is deadly and that the technology necessary to go through it to the moon has not been invented yet.
got it.
Wait a minute. How is it that you can that they went to the moon? He just said it's deadly radiation and the technology necessary to go through it to the moon and back has not been invented yet. We have a clip of a NASA scientist saying so. So how did they go through it to the moon and back? They didn't. They didn't have enough fuel to go through it, and they didn't have protection from the radiation. And we have a clip, again, it's at Sibrel.com, of the crew of Apollo 11 faking being halfway to the moon. They have a 1-foot circular window and they're making it look like that's the Earth floating in space when it's
Got it.
really part of the Earth outside of the window. So the lights come up and you see it's a mock Earth about 1 foot in diameter, and they're faking being halfway to the moon from Earth orbit. 2 NBC news directors agree that that footage proves that they didn't go to the moon. There's even a third track of audio of the CIA telling them to fake a 4-second radio delay to make it appear as though they're farther from Earth orbit. That was what convinced me when I popped in the tape, which said "Do not show to the public," and I'm seeing this 1-foot model of the Earth, and the lights come up, and it's a fake
Yeah.
shot with the CIA telling them how to do it. I'm like, oh my gosh, they really did fake the moon landing. It's so pathetic. It's
Yeah.
so sad that that is the case, but they did. And if it weren't for it being a positive lie, like you said, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear how the glorious moon landing. No, don't want to hear it. I would rather believe the lie. That's a
And
dangerous
and
way to
and by the
be.
way, I don't know if you get into this in your book. Was it all because of the competition with Russia at the time? I mean, people forget that in the 60s and 70s, the Soviet Union was an absolute superpower, and it was the United States versus the Soviet Union. Think of like Rocky Balboa versus Ivan Drago. So, like, from the research I've done, it seems like, this was just a big flex on Russia to say, "Hey, we got there first." Have you dug into why they faked it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's kind of multiple benefits. It's like if you decide to, relocate, with your wife and kids and go take another job several states away, it's not just one reason why it's a good idea. There's probably two or three better schools, more money, bigger house, away from bad neighbors or closer to good neighbors or something. There were multiple reasons or benefits you could say the gangsters got from faking the moon landing. But if you really want to know the spiritual core answer, think about Clinton, who said 20 times, I did not, 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 20
Right.
times. Can you
Right.
imagine? The moon landings are real, the moon landings are real, the moon landings are real, the moon landings are real. Okay, you got us, they're fake. And when he was asked why, right? Why did you do it? He said, because I could.
Mm,
You see that? Because I could get away with it.
yeah.
Why did the gangsters in the federal government fake the moon landing? Because they could get away with it. They got away with killing Kennedy. They got away with the fake beginning of the Vietnam War. And
Yeah.
there's no independent press coverage, just two government employees and a TV picture provided by the corrupt federal government. And a guy in the command center cannot tell a difference whether they're doing a real flight or a simulated practice flight, according to a flight director. You see, that's why they did it. Now, maybe initially it was to fool the Soviets, but the Soviets have since figured that out, because when I mentioned the smartest AI, just said 2 years ago that the moon missions are fake, Vladimir Putin was right there looking at the results.
Yeah.
Didn't look shocked at all. And this is one of the defenses of diehard, we must have gone to the moon, don't dare say otherwise, is
Yeah.
this the Chinese or the Soviets would have blown the whistle, but not really. I could have a picture of a world leader with a prostitute and upload it to the internet and bring that person down. Or I could blackmail them year after year after
Oh,
year after year. I
interesting.
have a friend who works in the command center of the Chinese Space Agency. He says everybody knows the moon missions are fake. They're blackmailing NASA for technology that Congress forbid them to receive. They're receiving anyway, so they won't blow the whistle on the Apollo program. The Soviets are probably doing the same thing. He didn't look surprised at all. In fact, he looked afraid that the truth might come out. Why
Yeah.
didn't RT? People think RT is some, alternative media. It's not. It's not more than Fox News that
Right.
canceled their number one program. They got 100 million views every broadcast. They brought it down.
Yeah.
Why? I thought they were in business to make money. No, they're in information control. It was nowhere on RT that Vladimir Putin was right there when the smartest AI said the moon missions are fake. Not a single story on RT. You see, because they are blackmailing
They're
the
blackmailing.
United
Okay,
States.
okay, okay. By the way, everybody, Bart is throwing in some real zingers, and I'm getting them. Like what he was just talking about was Fox News canceling Tucker Carlson, who was their number one ranked program, but they canceled him. And you're right, the information war is more important than anything. So just pay attention because Bart's throwing in some good ones. Okay, I get that. I could see the blackmailing of that because that is one of the arguments, like playing devil's advocate for a minute. That is one of the arguments everyone says. And even a few good friends of mine that we mentioned at the beginning of this episode said, if they faked it, the Russians would have gone berserk. The Chinese would have gone berserk. They would have all brought this out. The other argument I hear a lot is people say, in order to fake an operation like that, there would have to be hundreds of people that were involved, from a janitor to this person to that person. There's no way over all these years, somebody didn't decide to tell the truth, or somebody didn't think they would get some giant reward and spill the beans and things like that. What's your answer if somebody throws that at you saying, hey, there's got to be way too many people involved in this in order to fake it, to
Well,
have
that's
faked
like
it?
saying, it's absolutely impossible for someone to lift more than 500 pounds over their head. They said that for years, but that's just not true. It's been
Yeah.
done. And the fact is, the atomic bomb during World War II was the greatest secret of all time. It involved 129,500 people, and yet only 8 people knew what they were building. That's like saying what a
Wow.
bank teller, right? Let's see, how many bank tellers are at Bank of America? 500,000? Do
A
you
lot.
really think they know what the CEO knows about corruption in the bank? It's completely different. Were there 500,000 people on the moon watching the landing? There's no independent press coverage.
Yeah.
According to Eugene Krantz, flight director at NASA, who I spoke to personally, he said someone in the command center, okay, the rest of these people saying it's impossible to fool the world, they were either not alive at the time or watching it on their living room TV as a 4-year-old. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet the command center employee, according to Eugene Krantz, cannot tell the difference between a real flight and a practice flight. It's
Wow.
all a
Okay.
bunch of numbers going by on a screen. You
Okay.
see?
Okay.
And so they can easily. I mean, when they list hundreds of thousands of people, those are secretaries, those are food vendors, those are people supplying the photocopiers, even the guy making the glove, right? Do you think the CIA is so stupid to tell the guy making the glove, hey, we're really not going to the moon. Be sure not to tell us. I mean,
Yeah.
come
No,
on.
I hear you.
How
I hear you.
stupid do you
Okay.
think they
Okay.
are?
What do
There's
you think
only
about? I
there's
get it.
only
I get
3
it.
people and no independent press coverage. It's actually pretty easy to fool people.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Okay, some of my favorite videos of you are actually when you confronted Neil Armstrong and I believe Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. You confronted both of those guys. I remember Buzz for sure, and you had a Bible with you and you said, "Hey, if you really went to the moon and if the moon landing is real, put your hand on the Bible and swear it." And again, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think either one of them did that, and then I think Buzz Aldrin, did he punch you in the face?
Yeah, that was, quite a while ago, but yeah, he took offense.
Okay.
Um, it may not have been the most spiritual thing to ask someone to swear on the Bible. The Bible does say, not to take an oath. Just let your yes be yes and your no be no. Maybe
Uh-huh.
there's some pagan history to that, so maybe it was inappropriate for me to do that. The fact is, if I walked on the moon and someone thought otherwise, I would find that hysterically funny.
Yeah.
Really? You think it
Yeah.
was done in a TV studio? You want me to swear on a Bible? Sure. Would 2 Bibles make you feel better?
That's how
But
I
the
feel about it. That's how I
but the
feel about
fact
it.
is, when you watch that film, that's Astronauts Gone Wild, you can see it for free at Sibrel.com. They act like I go up to them in front of their wife and say, "Hey, your mistress says hello." You
Right,
see, a
right.
sword with no point causes no injury. The fact that they are reacting with anger is because it's a truthful
Yeah,
point. I'm disgracing them in front of the world where they're known as heroes. And how pathetic is that? Our heroes are traitors. We're
yeah,
worshiping Benedict Arnolds.
yeah,
It's pretty
yeah.
sad.
I think we're doing that with a lot of people, even in the current environment we live in. Okay, we talk. Oh, what's the deal with all the stuff with Stanley Kubrick? Like I've heard a lot of things that he was the one that I don't know. Was he the director of all of this? Did you get into that at all? Like was Stanley Kubrick the guy they hired to kind of direct the fake landing and all that?
I don't know. I don't mention that in my book or
Okay,
movie.
okay,
However, he would have been my likely choice if I
yeah,
were in charge of faking the moon missions. You could either have the general of the media department at the Pentagon try it and get good security but amateur results, or you could hire the best filmmaker on the planet who in 1968 was shooting a film about going to the moon, 2001: A Space Odyssey.
oh,
And
yeah,
so
that's right, that's
he
the
certainly
connection.
left clues that indicated that the moon missions were fake, either
Yeah,
from a firsthand knowledge or from observation, like I did from the pictures. He would have been my choice to fake them. Uh, I don't know. And when you talk about a whistleblower coming forward, we do have one. A gentleman by the name of Cyrus Eugene Akers.
Mhm.
in 2002 when he was dying, and fearing the judgment of God. And as best as we can tell from the scriptures, if you confess your sin, you're forgiven.
Mhm.
And the first thing that he said, actually, was that he was a murderer, that he had killed someone. And his son was there. You can see a video of this on the homepage of Sibrel.com. His son said, "Well, Dad, who did you kill?" He said, "A coworker, a friend who he worked with at Cannon Air Force Base, which was right across the street from where he lived. He was the chief of security at the Air Force's most secure base, their special operation base.
Mm.
When the military police came in to give the family closure, because the victim, maybe they said he disappeared or something, they asked him, well, why did you kill him? And he said, well, we both eyewitnessed the fake moon landing being filmed June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968. My friend thought it was morally wrong. He was going to tell the public, and I killed him to keep it a secret. That was his confession. And so, not only that, being in charge of security, he was given a list of 15 people who were allowed in. That list was given to him by President Johnson, who was there the first day of filming. He kept that list as a souvenir, and we published it in the book. And we have Buzz Aldrin was there observing. They had doubles in the spacesuits. Neil Armstrong was there. We had Van Allen was there, and a bunch of people I knew and a bunch of people I'd never heard of who were military intelligence. So we now know where at least the first fake moon landing was filmed. We have more than enough proof. An eyewitness. We have shadows intersecting at 90 degrees, which can only happen with electrical light. We have the fact that you can't have 1,000 times greater technology in the past and in the future. Like you said,
Yeah.
Ray, is there any technological machine that's better in 1969 than today? You see?
Yeah.
And
There's
then
yeah,
we have
absolutely.
this footage that I uncovered that two NBC news directors proves they never left Earth orbit. And there you go. Well, you should watch people watch the movie. A funny thing happened on the way to the moon, which is on the homepage, and they just gasp when
Yeah.
they see the lights come up, and it's not really the Earth floating in space. It's a 1 foot replica of the Earth, and it's like, oh my gosh, they actually did fake the moon landing. And now what? We have an administration that keeps sweeping it under the rug. They're afraid to tell the truth because it'll embarrass America, but the other nations already know, and we're being blackmailed by them. So it's better just to tell the truth. And then if the president really wants government reform, what better way than to show the public that they were played for suckers
Yeah.
6 times,
Yeah.
right? Show the public that the moon missions are fake, and you'll have government reform like you've never seen before.
Was Nixon president or was Lyndon B. Johnson president? Who was president when the moon landing was faked? Who was president in 69?
Well, the Nixon was president during all of the fake moon landings, and
Okay.
then President Johnson was there a year earlier when it was filmed a year in advance. So
Okay.
you have
Okay.
both political parties complicit in
Yeah.
the faking of the moon landing. So
Like
to say one party's better than the other is just not
no, no,
true. They're
no, absolutely.
easily to be corrupt.
I'm so convinced of the uniparty concept now more than ever based on the way Trump's been. So we have no argument there. I bring that up because I remember, like, didn't they supposedly call Nixon from the moon? Didn't Neil Armstrong call Nixon? Because I remember seeing Nixon with like a rotary phone supposedly talking to somebody on the moon. I always thought that was so ridiculous. I'm like, how on earth are they talking to each other on a phone call? Is that in the book? Is that in the movie?
Well, they allegedly did that. Of course, they weren't on the moon, and they were in Earth orbit the entire
Yeah.
time, which is much easier to do.
No, I know, but my point is, how ridiculous is it that people believe that Richard Nixon was speaking on a telephone in 1969 to Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon. Like they called Nixon from the moon. And how many miles away is the moon? I don't even know. Is it like
Well, it depends on the apogee or perigee, but it's about, 239,000 miles away, something like that.
thousand miles and that phone call went through? Like that's even absolutely ridiculous to think about. Okay, let me see what else. I wanted to ask about the Kubrick. The fact that Buzz Aldrin did punch you, I agree with you. I think yes. I mean, is it the nicest thing to do to make somebody swear on a Bible? No, but if you absolutely are truthful in what that person asks, I'll swear on the Bible. Or like you said, yeah, give me two Bibles. What else do you want? I think that's the easiest way to shut that person up. And then have we supposedly been to the moon again? I don't even know. I mean, I think that was the big one, but like supposedly we've been to the moon again or no?
No, they were all back-to-back missions during the Nixon administration.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so no one has left Earth orbit since 1972, or at least claim to have left Earth orbit. And they
Okay.
can't do it. They've said since then about 10 times they're going to return to the moon in 5 years. Can you imagine
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
10
Yeah.
times,
Yeah.
right? Reagan says they're going to return to the moon. Bush Sr. says they're going to return to the moon. Clinton says they're going to return to the moon in 5 years, right? Then you
Yeah.
have Bush Jr. said they're going to return to the moon in 5 years. He said that twice. Then you had Obama said they're going to return to the moon in 5 years. You had Trump said they're going to return to the moon in 5 years, and they can't do it. Why
Yeah,
is it
yeah.
that they can do something in 8 years with 1960s technology, but in 40 years of advancement since then, they can't do it? You
No,
understand?
totally,
You
abs
cannot have greater
absolutely.
technology in the past than in the future. It's impossible. The truth is right there, you know, and yet
Yeah,
people don't
absolutely.
want to see it.
This is now making me think, like, I'm trying to think when the Challenger exploded. I think I was in, like, the 6th grade or maybe the 7th grade, so that must have been, like, 1986 or 1987. You remember when I'm talking about the Challenger
Mhm.
explosion? And correct me if I'm wrong, but they supposedly were going back to the moon, correct?
No, no, the space shuttle was only designed to do Earth orbit.
Okay, okay, okay. So that space shuttle was just gonna do an Earth orbit, and then that blew up. Okay, alright, alright. So in my mind, I was thinking, was that supposedly meant to go back to the moon, and obviously they blew it up so they wouldn't even have to have that conversation. So, there's I don't put anything past any facet of government anymore, and the sacrificing of lives is, collateral damage to them. I mean, I think that applies to so many different things. Okay, have you been over the years, like, have you ever been, I guess, I don't know, get a random call at 2 a.m. and somebody on the other line tells you, "Hey, you better shut the hell up and stop talking about this," because 'cause you've been loud about this. Like, you've been really loud about it. Have you ever been kinda told to stop barking up this tree?
Well, the first film that we made was called The Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. It took 7 years to produce, and it culminates with that footage of them faking being halfway to the moon. 4 out of 5 people who previously thought the moon missions are real changed their mind in 45 minutes, largely because of that footage. That footage proves they're faking being halfway to the moon, which means they can't go halfway, which means they didn't go.
Yeah,
And they all had identical equipment. So if one equipment can't leave Earth orbit, none of it could. And so since the film came out, we produced Astronauts Gone Wild, which is me confronting the Apollo astronauts. And since then, I wrote a book called Moon Man, which is in audio, Kindle or print at Sibrel.com. And that's the one that has 17 interactive video links, all of which you can see for free anyway at the website. And it goes into the behind the scenes adventures. Basically, when my source came forward and confessed that he murdered somebody to
yeah,
keep the moon landing fraud a secret, when I was confirming the details with his son, over the phone prior to the publication of the book. A few days later, his house was broken into and everything about his father was confiscated. And a few days after that, he was threatened with death if he
Wow.
spoke to me again about his father's participation in the moon landing fraud. Now, when I found that footage, which proves they never left Earth orbit, I had some problems. And I go into this in great detail in a chapter in the book called The Funny Thing Happened on the Way to CNN, where I found the footage proving they never left Earth orbit. I showed it to the first NBC news director. He
Yeah.
agreed. It proved they didn't go to the moon. I was going to give it to a colleague at CNN where I was surrounded by the police. The tape was confiscated, and I was drugged by some government agents with something like truth serum. I was interrogated. I escaped their custody. I made my way back to Nashville, and I peed in a cup to prove that I had been drugged. And when I later inquired about the lab results, the lab informed me that they had a break in over the weekend, and the only thing stolen was my urine sample. So,
Wow.
we,
Wow. What are the odds of that?
yeah, these adventures I go into great detail in the book.
Yeah.
I didn't mention them in the film, but this is kind of my memoir about what happened. And sadly, they did fake the moon landing. You have to understand when Ralph Nader
Mm,
wanted to get GM to put airbags in cars, they had him followed by the FBI
mm.
just to not put airbags in cars. And
Wow.
so imagine the harassment for a journalist uncovering the embarrassment that they actually did fake the moon landing. You see? So, yeah, I have had problems about it. My sources have had problems about it. And maybe one Apollo astronaut was murdered when he was about to confess. There were whistleblowers at NASA and Rocketdyne who were also murdered. And according to the widow of an Apollo astronaut who I interviewed for about 3 hours, she said her husband was murdered by the CIA. And this was the guy who was going to be the first man to walk on the moon who wouldn't cooperate with the fraud. So, according to her, he was murdered by the CIA. So, the first document of our country is the Declaration of Independence, which says when any government becomes destructive of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. So the people and any state has the legal authority to withdraw from participation with the federal government when they are destructive of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, the first one is life. They're murdering their own people. Woods was a plan in the Kennedy administration to bomb Americans to kill hundreds of Americans so they could blame it on Cuba and go to
Cuba.
war with
Right.
Cuba. What do you
Right.
think
Right.
9/11 was, right?
Yeah.
So, and then if they're starting the Vietnam War based on an event that didn't happen, then they murdered 58,000 of their own soldiers. Then there's, the time the government put radioactive iodine in mother's milk to see if the babies would be deformed. So this type of thing is going on in the federal government. And unless they get caught with something like the moon landing fraud that will outrage people, they're going to continue to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I don't know that there's much hope left for the world or America. We need divine intervention
Yeah.
because these people are going to keep doing what they're doing and worse unless they
Yeah.
get caught.
Yeah. You have thoughts on 9/11?
Well, when I do research as a journalist and a
Yeah.
filmmaker, my opinion is the opinion of the experts. If I interview somebody who works at a pharmaceutical company for 10 years as vice president and he's a virologist, I don't know about virology. So if he says there's no reason to take the medicine, that the reason is being fabricated. And if he says the medicine is not good for you, that becomes my opinion. If
Got it.
a relative of JFK says he was killed by the CIA, that's my opinion. If 3,000 Architects and engineers are risking their livelihoods and their reputations and say
Yeah.
it's mechanically impossible for skyscrapers to collapse with a pinhole airplane going in and out. That's my opinion. All you have to
Yeah.
do is look at the Oklahoma City bombing photograph, where half
Yes.
the building is blown away and the grid still stands. It doesn't collapse. So a pinhole going in and out of a grid is not going to cause it to collapse. And then half of Americans don't even know about Building 7, a 47-story building that collapsed the same day without being hit
Yeah.
by an airplane. I mean, come
Yeah.
on, people. And, they
Yeah.
have animation to prove that the, building collapsed because of a furniture fire. Just like they
Yeah.
have animation of them landing on the moon, an animation that Oswald killed Kennedy.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Are you,
it's unbelievable.
do you know Richard Gage? Are you friends with Richard Gage?
No.
Okay, Richard was one of the original architects on the 3000 architect 9/11 Truth Committee. I had him on the podcast and he delivered an unbelievable presentation that basically proves that, Building 7, which by the way, this is insane that there are people that still don't even know that Building 7,
I know. People in
fell
the
down.
government.
That's
I talked to
nuts.
military people. I mentioned Building 7. They're like, what's that? I
Yeah,
mean, that's
exactly.
how much they
Exactly.
control the media.
Yeah. Yeah.
Building 7 proves it was a conspiracy, proves it's
Yeah,
an
and it
inside
proves
job.
it was a controlled demolition. Richard's
That's right.
presentation,
And if
I'll
that
send
one
it
was
to
a
you. It's
controlled
excellent.
demolition, what about the other two the same day, hours
Sure,
earlier?
sure.
I mean, come
My
on.
other one on 9/11 is just the Pentagon. It's like, where's the plane? You never see the plane hit the Pentagon, and the odds of being able to hit the Pentagon. And then there was one interview with this guy, Jamie McIntyre, I think on either CBS or CNN, where he was up close and he said, from my up close vantage point, I don't see any remnants of a plane. And that interview got aired once and then they never aired it again. So anyway, those are all excellent examples. Anything else on the moon landing? Anything else you want to leave people with on this?
Well, I would say imagine this. Imagine what would happen if the truth about the moon landing fraud came out. If, let's say, the president or the next president brings forward an Apollo astronaut or CIA personnel and they say, look, the government's gotten out of control. They faked the moon landing, and we're going to look into 9/11. We're going to look into JFK. What would happen? I mean, it would be like the entire world had a glass of cold water thrown into their face. Then they wake up and realize that they're sleepwalking,
Yeah.
and they look down and they're 1 foot away from a cliff. While it would be messy, like popping a boil, to tell the truth about the moon landing fraud, there would be relief and healing. We don't want to live in a world and we don't want to live in a country where they're faking the moon landing, the greatest event in human history, and murdering people to cover it up. And until we tell the truth about it, the deep state, the gangsters, the evil people have won. So we
Yeah.
have to tell the truth about it, regardless of the consequences. If Lucifer is the father of lies, he can be defeated by telling the truth.
Yeah.
Apollyon is the name of Lucifer in the book of Revelation. Apollyon, Apollo, liar. They're saying it
How
right
funny.
there,
How
hidden in
funny.
plain sight.
Yeah.
And
Are you
so
Christian? Are you Christian? I've noticed a lot of religious connotations. Are you Christian?
I try
Yeah.
to be
Okay. Okay. That's
and
fair.
fail most of the time, but
Okay. That's
I'm
fair.
trying.
That's a fair way to put it. That's fair. Listen, I think you've touched on so many things. And by the way, I really do have to commend you. You're knowledgeable on all of this and you've thrown out so many subtle nuggets. I mean, I get all of them. I really do because I've studied all this, but I think people are going to have to watch this thing a few times to get all the little nuggets of things from the Gulf of Tonkin to Operation Northwoods to JFK to 9/11 to, I mean, I guess I can say COVID at this point. I think we're allowed to say it. But everything you said honestly makes a lot of sense. And I think the unfortunate part is everybody thought Trump was the guy that was going to unveil all this and unmask all this. And whether it's the Epstein files or the JFK, what really happened with JFK, what really happened with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., what really happened with Martin Luther King Jr., all those quote unquote files that, whatever they released were so redacted and they were so contrived. I don't think anybody got any closure. But I will tell you this, when you put your name and fake moon landing in TikTok, there are thousands of people that agree with you. I mean, more than that even. And there's a lot of independent journalists, independent people that have taken your work and then have, even taken it to another level, and they've cited it and they've talked about it. And so anyway, you've got a lot of people agreeing with you, and I'm one of them.
Well, I wouldn't say, like you called me the expert at the beginning. I wouldn't consider myself the expert. There are other people who have done more research into the rocket propulsion, how that can prove we didn't go to the moon, or the geology of the rocks, or even the photographs. There's a great guy in Great Britain who studies the angles of the lighting and does
Wow, okay.
grids and all these things. But I guess my specialty is the overview, putting it together, and the zeal and passion that I went from being afraid to make the movie for fear I would be killed, to realizing I'm going to die anyway. And there is a right and a wrong. And any president has to realize, so what if they threaten to kill you? It'd be better to be right in the sight of God than in the sight of men. And no one wants to die a coward. We have to be willing to die for what is right. That's why bullies win, because no one is willing to die for what is right anymore. I changed my mind and I said, the faking of the moon landing is more profound than if they had actually gone. It is a truth worth dying for that the public needs to know. So maybe a president will have that gumption in the future and save America and humanity.
Maybe. Let's hope. It's definitely not this current one. All right, Bart, listen, this was awesome. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to put links to your website, your book, the movie. I want everybody to have those accessible. I'll put them in the show notes. I really do appreciate the time. All right, everybody. I told you this one was going to be a banger. This was a banger. We might have to have you back on it after I get a ton of questions, and I've got a few friends I know who are going to be naysayers, and they're going to try to come back with holes to poke. So we might have to do a quick follow up. But listen, I really appreciate the time. Hang on the line. All right, everybody, call a spade a spade. Do your own research, come to your own conclusions. But you know what? Have an open mind to everything. All right, hold on, Bart.
This episode was brought to you by Zippix nicotine toothpicks. Zip more, smoke less. Totally satisfying, discreet, and delicious. Zippix nicotine-infused toothpicks are available in 6 great flavors, each containing at least 2 milligrams of nicotine to curb those cravings. Zippix is FDA registered and proudly made in the USA. Use discount code DSD for 10% off your order at zippixtoothpicks.com. Zip more, smoke less, save 10%.